And this is in many ways a symbolic and a significant visit that reiterates the strong ties that India has had with Sri Lanka, the strong cultural, historical and also trade and other ties that India has with Sri Lanka. And this, remember, is the second day of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's tour, the first of his international tours. Yesterday he was in Maldives, and this morning he's arrived in Colombo. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be meeting with the Sri Lankan President in just a bit from now. And post that, he will also be meeting, interestingly, with the other political leaders. Mahinda Rajapakse, the former strongman and president of Sri Lanka, is also one of the leaders that Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be meeting. He'll also be meeting with leaders of the Tamil National Alliance and the other opposition leaders as well. And this, considering the symbolism that is attached to this meeting, is an extremely crucial meeting. This is the first trip by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. This was a visit that was originally planned as a stopover, but it's been a pretty packed day for the Prime Minister as he is meeting with virtually all leaders of any consequence in the island nation. And Siddhant, if I can bring you in on this. This is very smart diplomacy by the Indian Prime Minister. He's hit the ground running. He visited Maldives yesterday and he spoke about terror when he addressed the Maldivian Majlis, that is their parliament. And then he visits Sri Lanka, a country that's been rocked by that horrific violence that we saw on the 21st of April. And he's made it abundantly clear that no individual nation can actually fight against terror individually, because this is a global problem, and therefore cooperation on terror is especially key to ensuring a safe neighborhood.
Well, he has set the priority for the region, that is counter-terror, and how terror is a big scourge. Starting with his Maldives visit in the parliament, when he spoke, he highlighted three important issues. One, of course, was terror, another climate change, and, of course, Indo-Pacific. But on terror, he said that the world community should come together, they should have a conference and discuss this issue. Remember, India has been calling the world community to have a common definition of terrorism, because we know there are countries and elements who have been differentiating between good terrorism and bad terrorism, as the Prime Minister yesterday spoke in the parliament. India had proposed convention in the United Nations, that is CCIT, in 1996. It's been 20 years and it's not passed because the world cannot agree on a common definition of terrorism. Now, of course, he's in Sri Lanka, and the fact that from the airport he went straight to the church, St. Anthony's Church, is symbolic and sends out a clear message that when it comes to terrorism, India will stand by all those people, countries impacted or are the victim of terrorism, and of course will be focusing on making sure that countries who support, sponsor terrorism will be isolated. And we are seeing the pressure on Pakistan. Just few weeks from now, the FATF will be meeting, and as WION broke the story just few days ago, that it's going to be listed, continue to be listed on the grey list of FATF. That is going to squeeze the Pakistani economy. But if I can talk about the visuals, this is the parliament of Sri Lanka, and this is the road where we saw the convoy. Is one of the oldest roads in Sri Lanka, and on this road all the hotels which were targeted by the terrorists, the Shangri-La Hotel, the Cinnamon Hotel, the other hotels are present on this very road.
Indeed, and on our screens we've got the Indian Prime Minister has been received by the Sri Lankan President Maithripala Sirisena there. It's overcast and it's raining very heavily, and this, of course, Siddhant, is a very crucial meeting of the Indian Prime Minister with the Sri Lankan leadership, reiterating that for a safe neighborhood, it is important that both nations cooperate on counter-terror operations. This is also a symbolic visit. There's also a visit for the Indian Prime Minister where he's expressing solidarity with the people of Sri Lanka, as he has made it a point that in his very first visit, after having taken charge as the Prime Minister for a second time running, he has decided to visit firstly Maldives and now the island nation of Sri Lanka. There, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Maithripala Sirisena walking shoulder to shoulder as we are given to understand. Yes, they're posing for a photo opportunity there. And this, Siddhant, is a crucial image that will be beamed across, not just in India and Sri Lanka, but also across the world. You know, what was being spoken about is that India is in fact losing turf to China in the way the India, Sri Lanka, China triangle, and that perhaps Sri Lanka was moving closer to China is what was being described because of the debt diplomacy China practices. But that has changed ever since Prime Minister Narendra Modi has taken charge. He's been very assertive in how he deals with the nations in the neighborhood.
And that was pretty evident with the fact that he mentioned Indo-Pacific in the Maldivian parliament. But as you mentioned, these images are strong images, images which sends out a message that Sri Lanka is safe to be. In a sense, we saw how after the 21st of April terror attack, there were a lot of advisories issued by countries, including by India, and issuing of travel advisory impacts the tourism in a country. Tourists are, in a sense, advised not to go, and that it's a country whose mainstay is tourism, other than the other thing. But of course, a lot of Indians go to Sri Lanka. So when we spoke to the envoy, Sri Lankan envoy, he said that the best gift the Indian Prime Minister can give to his country during his visit is to remove that travel advisory. India has softened its stand but hasn't still removed the travel advisory because there is still some kind of danger in the country. But this, of course, the images beaming from Colombo right now shows a strong sense of camaraderie between both the nations, both the countries. And of course, the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the President of Sri Lanka, we know the President of Sri Lanka has had some kind of tiff with the Prime Minister. There we saw reports coming of a dispute between both the leaders over a project, India's role in a project, but by and large it seems that that has been solved. The project which I'm talking about is a trilateral project between India, Japan and Sri Lanka, and India is playing a crucial role. India is now working with Japan across the region to make sure there are various infrastructure projects. This, of course, we know how Japan also is keen to engage with India, and all the countries such as Japan, Australia, India, US coming together in various formats, whether it's Quad, whether it's Indo-Pacific, and keen to engage with each other because these countries have a lot of things in common, such as democracy and rule of law. And we know China has its own way of functioning, and it would like to see world with its own rules, which many countries won't like.
Absolutely indeed, Siddhant. Do continue to stay on with us. Let's listen into what is in fact happening in Colombo then. All right, so this is the ceremony that is presently underway in Colombo in Sri Lanka as Prime Minister Narendra Modi is being hosted by the Sri Lankan President. And also, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has also just tweeted a little while back where he has said, and I quote him here, "I am confident Sri Lanka will rise again. Cowardly acts of terror cannot defeat the spirit of Sri Lanka. India stands in solidarity with the people of Sri Lanka." This is the tweet that the Prime Minister has put out just a little while back after he visited the St. Anthony's Church. And from St. Anthony's Church, he's of course driven up to the Sri Lankan Parliament where he's meeting, we're given to understand, with the legislators of Sri Lanka. He is being accompanied by the Sri Lankan President Maithripala Sirisena. Now, this is a very symbolic visit. It is, of course, a visit for the optics, but also this is a visit that in many ways strengthens the India-Sri Lanka equation in a way that has not been seen in the last few decades. Because what has happened over the course of the last several months, ever since and also the last few years, ever since Prime Minister Narendra Modi has taken charge, he's emphasized on India's relationship with the nations in the neighborhood. And Sri Lanka, as India's neighbor, is extremely crucial in the diplomatic push for Prime Minister Narendra Modi and in terms of how he carries out his diplomacy. And this, of course, is a crucial visit by the Prime Minister. This is his very first visit by the Indian Prime Minister after having taken charge for a second time as the Prime Minister of India. These are the visuals that we are getting live from Colombo, where we saw the Indian Prime Minister being hosted by the Sri Lankan President Maithripala Sirisena. Now, the rift between the Sri Lankan President Maithripala Sirisena and the Sri Lankan Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe is something that is quite well known. But despite of that, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, of course, has done a remarkable balancing act. He's tried to take both leaders within Sri Lanka along, and irrespective of the power center that is prevalent in Sri Lanka. Because remember, Maithripala Sirisena will be stepping down as the president in Sri Lanka later on this year. And the person, Sajith Premadasa, who is widely speculated to as someone who will take over as the president in Sri Lanka, is someone who is in the Ranil Wickremesinghe camp, who is also favoured by Maithripala Sirisena. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi has made it a point that he'll be visiting not just members in the government, but also members of the opposition. Therefore, he will be meeting with the former strongman and President Mahinda Rajapaksa.